My name is Mirjam Szpiro Bait Talmi. I was born in Duisburg, Hamborn. My parents were immigrants from Jewish immigrants from Poland. I was born in 1935. That means that Hitler was already in power. I was 3 when I was 3.5 on Crystal Night. My memory came back when I was 5, and I have the testimony of children who were with me, and a couple of photographs and things that I have. And also, after about 60 years, I decided to go and look for what happened to me, and I found so much documentation about myself. The pictures that I showed you are from that. So much documentation. I found out exactly what happened to my parents before they were murdered, and here I am. From Holland, I joined the Kindertransport, and I was in England, just my sister, brother, and I, and our parents didn't come back. I had to learn to live with nobody because they separated the children, and my brother died. And my sister, who was much older than me, taught me how to brush my teeth. She was 9. She taught me, and I was 3 when it happened. She told me the story of Crystal Night, and I told her what I remember from the day that the SS took my father. And I remember before that, my father taking me to the Jewish market, and we were laughing. That's the last time we laughed, because it was just before Crystal Night. And he bought me a honey cake in the shape of a heart with a red ribbon. And that's my last memory of him. It's not my last memory of him. The last memory of him is when I saw SS soldiers taking him from the bed. I didn't see him, I saw the SS boots. I learned this from one cousin who was a survivor of my family. This cousin told me that my father's family had a lace business in Dunska Wola in Poland, and and they sent my father to Germany because the Polish army wanted to take him to the army, and he started working as peddling lace in the markets, and he used to go out on his bike in the morning. My sister went to the Jewish school, and my mother stayed at home and looked after my sick brother. He was very sick. Looked after my sick brother and me. I have one painting. I paint, and I started painting when my second husband died. And I painted what I saw was the house where we lived. And it's very important for the story. We lived in an area where there were immigrants from not only Jewish immigrants. There was a square with cobbled, I remember this, with cobbled, the square was with cobbled stones. It was an old Roman square, and you had to go down an alleyway to get to my house. The house was the house was down the alley. they were back-to-back houses, I suppose you know, from the Industrial Revolution. And you went through a wooden gate into a sort of square. There was a outside toilet there. It wasn't a toilet like we know. It was a hole in the ground, and then you went straight into the room. It was a room with 4 chairs and a table, an oven in the wall where my mother used to make the gefilte fish and the Streuselkuchen on Shabbat. My sister and I, we talked about what happened, and I asked, we once quarrelled, and I said, I don't want to, I'm not staying in your house, and she said, don't leave, and she ran after me, don't leave me, you too. And I came back, and I saw this little girl with the long plait, very green eyes. She was very sick and she was very big, and she ran after me, and she used to make the most wonderful gefilte fish. And she used to have gefilte fish and this very sharp red horseradish. And we sat at the table, and she said to me, I asked her, where did you learn to make gefilte fish from? And she said, I worked on it until I got to the taste that Mutti used to make. And I sat there and I said, and I remember the Streuselkuchen. The smell of it, and then we started reconstructing, and then I just sat there and I said, I only saw their boots. And she said, yes, you were so small. She said, what happened was there was Crystal Night, and we stayed in our parents' bedroom. You went up sort of a staircase, and upstairs there were 2 rooms. I remember the rooms, 2 rooms, the children's room and the parents' room. They were joining rooms, and there was a bathroom with a bathtub, but no running water, of course. And what happened was, on Crystal Night, which I don't remember, she remembered, she said we sat in we locked the door. There wasn't much that we could do of someone entering the house. But that's what we had, and we sat there scared. And she told me that the smell of the burning synagogue, of the soot of the burning synagogue, and the feeling of soot in her nose. This was 50 years after we arrived in England. It was 6 weeks before my sister died, and if we wouldn't have reconstructed then, I wouldn't have known what happened to me. And she said, she told me, and nothing happened to us except we heard the screaming in the streets and the breaking of glass in the town, but we were a little far away. But and she told me that the next morning she went to school, and they locked them in the Jewish school. She went to the Jewish school, and then they quickly sent them home because they were scared that something would happen to them. I don't know how long after Crystal Night, it must have been a few weeks after Crystal Night, my sister told me there was a rumour saying that they were going to round up Jewish men, and but we didn't know when. And then one night, I remember it like yesterday, we heard shouting in the night, Juden raus. We heard them, I'm saying them because I didn't know who it was then. We heard them breaking the gate outside. We heard them breaking down the door, the wooden door, We locked it. There was a lock on the door, not pladellit, a lock on the door, and they went right up the stairs as if they knew where to go. And I said to my sister, I don't know how many boots there were. Remember, I was only 3.5, so everything was very big for me, and everything was big, and people were big for me. And I said, where was I that I just saw their boots? So she said, Mutti told us to get under the bed. We had small beds in our room. That's why you only saw the boots. And they took my father and left, shouting all the time. And I remember the boots, they had leather. They must, now I know what happens when I tell the stories is what I remember from then and what I know. They had leather, they used to have leather soles, and you could hear them coming up the stairs and shouting. And I don't know how many boots they were. And I never saw my father again. The next morning, we got up and my father had gone. And we went downstairs, and the whole house was broken. All the little, you can take our pride away from us, you can take our lives, you can beat us, but you can never take the wonderful things that we have had. And the wonderful thing we had was when my father came home from work, every day, my mother used to make supper, and my mother, father, and sister and brother sat at the table, and I sat on my father's lap. And I've taken that with me all my life. And I think that is part of what built me to be the person I am today, because that is what I remember of a loving family. But they took my father away, and the next morning we came downstairs and my sister went to school, and my mother, I remember what my mother was wearing. She was wearing a pair of clogs, and she was wearing a blue dress with big white buttons all the way down. And she told my brother to stay at home, and she took me to the police station. I don't know at what time in my life I translated it or if it was real, but I think it was real, because I've remembered it all my life. I've remembered it. We went to the neighborhood police station, and she dragged me along the cobbled street. My mother was crying, and the policeman shouted at her. He was dressed in a blue. This is, I don't know where it came from, but he was dressed in a blue uniform with a big helmet with gold was on the table, and he had all sorts of insignias, golden insignias, and he shouted at her, "What do you want, Jewish bitch?" And she said to him, my husband was taken last night, and where has he been taken to? And he shouted at her. And what I know, I know it must have been real, because I remember the words, but I don't know whether they're German or not. He shouted at her, "Das ist SS business, Jewish bitch." And she cried. I remember my mother's tears. I don't remember her face. And that is what I remember of Duisburg, Hamburg. I don't remember leaving home. My next memory is getting on a black train, and there is a figure there, it must have been my mother, and that's the last time I saw my mother. We were sent to Holland. I thought that we went on the Kindertransport, but my sister said no. We were sent to, it was a private arrangement, and I believe today, I mean, I've worked it out, that my mother didn't want to separate us because I was too small to go on the Kindertransport, and she must have wanted to save me as well. And the next I know that we didn't get to any family. My sister said we didn't get to any family. We got to this quarantine, they called it, but the children write about it that there were guards with guns and dogs, and anyway, we were there. The children write that that part was like a prison camp, but the Jewish community, the Dutch community, was allowed to come in, and they even write that they said we weren't hungry, and they write that even on a Friday for Shabbat, the children used to get sweet things. I know today that when Westerbroek in Holland, the concentration camp in Holland was established, they took the adults to the camp, and the children they took to the Dutch orphanage in Amsterdam, which today is the National Museum of Amsterdam. I went there, and when I went there, I went there about 6 years ago. I walked in and I started shaking. I didn't remember anything about it. Now, from there, I only know what the children write. And the children write that we were always hungry. We slept in long dorms, and we slept in long dorms. The photograph, it seems to me, it looks like it's probably from High Platte, because there was a woman, she's a righteous Gentile who used to come and visit us. And my birthday is on the 13th of May. And on the 10th of May, the Germans came into Amsterdam, and they were on their way to, they were on the way to the orphanage to take the Jewish children, of course. And she organized with the Jewish, she was called Gertrude Weissmüller, and she organized to get the children out of the orphanage. She and the Dutch underground and the Jewish community organized buses to take us to Imuden, which is the harbour, and we were told. It was my birthday, and I had a pink dress. I don't know where I had the pink dress for. I've always remembered the pink dress. And we were told to we were told to take whatever we could in our hands. I had a doll, and so I took the doll. My sister had a coat and a photograph of my father, and she took it. My brother is vague because he was very sick and he doesn't play a very part. Later on, when I did, I call it my journey with my family, I found a letter to my parents, that a doctor wrote to a letter to my parents to, it obviously never got to them. He wrote a letter to them telling that they should come to see my brother or they wouldn't see him again. That meant he was on the way to, he was in a very bad way. And we got on the bus in the evening of the 13th of May at night, and we were told not to talk. My sister told me that she used to put her hand on my mouth like that I wouldn't cry or I wouldn't talk, so nobody could hear us, because all the Germans stopped us on the way to Eindhoven, and the Dutch police. And eventually we got to Eindhoven. They say that Eindhoven was it was hell. The Germans were shooting. It was being bombed. There were people running, trying to get on boats. They had the Jewish community. Gertrude Weissmuller had commandeered a boat. The boat which they found was called the Bordergraven, and it was from the Dutch Navy junkyard, and it was waiting for us. We were 74 children, and she'd taken as many people as she could. There were 200 people on the boat, which was meant for 40 people. But before we got to the boat, we got to Eindhoven, and there was shooting and bombing and explosions, and there were British paratroopers coming down as well, and that was what there was there. She tells this story, and she said we got to Eindhoven and we wanted to get to the boat. Now you can either go by a ferry to the boat, or you can walk. And anyway, she got off the bus. And all of a sudden, the Germans won't let us off the bus. And then she stayed off the bus. And then around, she heard a rumor that the officer in charge of Imuden wanted to flood. You know that Holland's with the canals, wanted to flood Imuden, and she asked someone to take her to the harbour manager, and she told the harbour manager that he must talk to the he must talk to the officer and tell him that if he floods Imuden, all Holland will flood, and the German progress will be stopped. So he didn't flood Imuden, but he came to her and he said that because you saved us, we will let the children on the boat. My sister had a coat, and there was a sort of bench, and we got on the boat, and there was a bench, and she lay me down on the bench, and she covered me with her coat. And then there was a siren, and we were told that we had to go into the hold, and we had to wait in a queue to go down to the hold. And I started to cry. That I remember. I've lost my. They started bombing us. I say they because I don't know who it was. It was the Germans bombing us. we were told later, bombing us, and we went. We stood in the hole, and my sister said to me, I remember her saying it, and she said it in German, and I asked her, did you really say that? She said, yes. If you don't shut up, I'll give you something to cry for. And then all of a sudden she said, where's my coat? I've lost my mother and father have gone, and now my coat's gone. And I remember that. I said it to her. Along the way, I've translated it into English, but it was all in German. I imagine what I heard the policeman saying was also that I've translated along the way. And my sister was amazing. At the age of 9, she was mother and father to a child of 3 and to a sick brother of 11. She told me my name. I know I was called Mia, and she told me my name was Mirjam Szpiro, Szpiro. And she taught me to brush my teeth. She taught me everything. And then we went into the hold. The hold was dark and it smelled terribly. And of course it smelled of pee-pee and of khaki, and these crying children were crying. There were very few children of my age, because the kinder transport only took children from 5 years old. And I remember the only food we had were very hard crackers, and we used to call them ship's biscuits. That's what we call them in England. And then all of a sudden the shooting and the bombing stopped, and there was just one other thing that I said. This is my usual optimistic self. I said to my sister, and I remembered it, it's my birthday, there are fireworks, and I remember that as well. And then the bombing stopped, and on the radio there was an announcement that the Queen had left. Anyway, she'd resigned, and she'd gone to England, and she had given in to the Germans. She went to England, so they said we could sail. And we were on the sea for 6 days in that hold with one cracker, and there must have been water, and with the smells. So on the way we were shot at again. But this time we were shot by the British. It takes about 18 hours to get from Emuden to Harwich. We were supposed to arrive in Harwich, and we were being bombarded on the way. Later, it works out that it was the first Dunkirk, and I read about that, and they thought we were an enemy ship. And they sent us round the whole of England to Liverpool. It took us 6 days. It was freezing cold. It was in May. And we arrived in Liverpool on the 19th of May. And my sister told me that all the media was there to write about us, and they gave me another doll. And we were sent to an industrial town near Manchester called Wigan, and then some of the children were billeted in the YMCA, and YMCA, yes, the YMCA, and but my sister, my brother, and I were billeted with a Christian family, and they cleaned the house the school every day, so we had somewhere to play. That I remember. And at 11 o'clock in the morning, we used to go to the local monastery, and the nuns gave us an orange. That I remember. And then I thought that the Jewish community didn't know we were there, but it evidently, I mean, I really don't know how it worked out. They had organised a hostel for us in Manchester, one for the boys and one for the girls. And we were sent to, we were sort of attached to the Kindertransport, and the Jewish Refugee Committee took over. And I was in the hostel for a short while. And then, of course, there was no framework for me. So, and the children in England at the time, England was already being blitzed, and there were bombs in Manchester. So they took the children to a village about 15 miles away. It was called Lim, and I was in a Jewish children's home, and I went to school. I was separated from my sister and brother. And then a lifetime of being on my own with no parents, no sister, no brother. That's my story. Internet is an amazing thing. And although I'm a long way, I'm internet literate. So I found that what happened to my father after that, he was taken to Dachau. And he was taken to Dachau, and after we arrived in England, he was told that if he left Germany within a week, he could go free. If not, he would be taken to hard labour, and he worked in hard labour in the coal mines around Duisburg. And my mother, I found a document saying that she had disappeared in the Lodz ghetto. So I don't know, but my granddaughter was in Auschwitz, and she told me that she had found her name in Auschwitz. So we don't really know. But my father's story is longer than that. They were taken together to when the Jews were expelled from Duisburg, they were sent to Lodz. And from Lodz, my father, this is what I know about my father. I have documentation. I have all the documents now. You can find anything now. My father was sent to Auschwitz, and in 1944, he was sent on the train to Dachau, where they were building the tunnels for hiding the planes and the tanks. And I have 3 documents saying that Jakob Szpiro left Dachau. It was called, what was it called? I've forgotten. I've forgotten. It's not really important. He left. He left Dachau. Reason: he died. It's all in German, but I managed to translate it. And it was 3 weeks before the Allies came to Dachau. That's what happened to my parents. My brother died, and for years and years, we didn't know what happened to him. For years and years, we didn't know what happened to him. And about 10 years ago, I went to a study group for literature, and we all told, all the women and the men, that was one man, we told where we were from and what. And we read a story called Mr. Lin's daughter. It was about a refugee, who had lost everything, probably something like Vietnam or Cambodia or wherever, and he got to a camp, an internment camp in France, and he carried his granddaughter with him. And they asked, the teacher asked me to tell if I would mind telling her what it was like being a refugee. And I told them, and she said, "You don't say anything about your brother." So I said, "He just disappeared. They told me he died and he just disappeared." And it's an amazing story. It's he just disappeared. Some English immigrants in Rehovot, with friends in England, found his grave in the United Synagogue graveyard in London, without a stone, just with a piece of wood saying his name, Otto Szpiro. And from there we got documents about ourselves, where he'd been. He'd been in a monastery for which was a hospital and a school for terminal orphans, and they had had a rabbi come and visit him every month, every week, and he'd had a bar mitzvah. And he died, and we went to England and we put a name stone on his grave, and that's my family. I have a family now, 6 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren, and the wonderful thing today is that I can relate to my grandchildren. When the whole family, I had nobody left but my sister, and years of being on my own without any family at all. And today I have a big family, and I'm in great contact with them. My old age, if there wouldn't be a war now, it would be good. I always say, what I can control, I'm good. What's happening around us is not good. First of all, I am one of the younger people. There are younger people than I am from Poland, because the Germans came in later. But it's the end of us. Nobody will tell that story afterwards. And we have, you know, since the war started, and since the war started, and from the day that I became, who swore that I would never be, I never would be a refugee again, turned into a refugee again, who said I'm for 2 states. I'm always for 2 states. I'm for peace. I'm prepared to do anything for peace. Anything for peace. My whole life has changed. My whole way of thinking has changed. I turned into the terrorists were on the wire fence 100 meters away from us when they were killed. That means that this is the 2nd time that I've had my life, the 3rd time actually, because I have another story. But in one of the bombings, it's the 2nd time that I got my life, and now, in addition, there's the anti-Semitism in the world. The growing anti-Semitism in the world. So one thing that I think that our people have to know, and the world has to know, what the Jewish people have been through throughout the ages. I've just gone back to a book by Bashevish Singer, and I read about the pogroms in the 17th century. And it was even before that. I go to a Bible study group. I see what there was. But we have to know, we have to look for the reason why the world is so against us. I can understand the world being so against us because what's going on in Gaza, what's going on in Gaza. When I hear of the children being killed or innocent people being killed, but what about us? We have a right to live. I believe that I believe that every nation, every group, anybody has the right to self-determination. I really believe that. But when you're confronted with during the Holocaust, my son-in-law once asked me, he's a Yemenite, and he once asked me, why didn't your father fight back? So I said, what was he supposed to do? Take a pea shooter? And we couldn't fight back then. And we couldn't fight back then. And we didn't know, we weren't organized. Today we have a country and we are organized. I'm not going to talk about this, what happened on what I think about the 7th of December. But if I say that, I said I was never going to be a refugee again. I believe that we have a state and we have a right to look after ourselves, but yet I am against. I am against extremism on both sides, Israeli and Palestinian, or anybody, homosexual, gypsies, not only Jews. I'm against it. I believe that the Palestinians have a right to self-determination. They do not have, God is a no God for me, but to fight in the name of my God, somebody else, and get rid of them is a sin. Hate is a sin. So I believe that we have to fight against racism. We have to fight against extremism, and it's an unending fight. But I tell the story because I'm somebody who has been through that physically and lost so much and gained so much. And I think the only thing that we can do in the whole world is education, education, and more education against racism, against hate of the other.